I am a 42-year-old woman living in Dallas, Texas, and I've been married to Nate, a 44-year-old man, for 9 years. When we first got together, I thought we were on the same page about most things, especially about family and money. Nate was calm, quiet, and always seemed to be the go-with-the-flow type, the kind of guy who said he supported me, but didn't always show up when it mattered. I'm a freelance interior designer, and I've always been careful with my finances. I don't splurge on expensive bags or post luxury vacations on social media. I'm just good with budgeting, saving, and planning for the future, because that's how I was raised. Growing up, I didn't have a safety net to fall back on, so I've always been careful with money. Nate and I had been trying to save for IVF in hopes of starting a family someday, and we also wanted to move to a bigger place. Every month, I'd move a chunk of our income into a savings account. This account wasn't a secret. He knew about it, but never asked about the details, which was fine with me. I liked handling our finances myself. One important thing to note, that savings account was in my name only, always had been. Nate didn't seem to mind that it was solely my responsibility. Then one Saturday morning, everything changed. It was around 10 a.m. I was still in my pajamas, sipping coffee and cleaning up the house. Nate was half watching a History Channel rerun. The next thing I knew, there was urgent, aggressive knocking on the door. It wasn't the polite, neighborly kind of knocking. It was frantic, like they were in some sort of emergency. I opened the door, and standing there were Nate's parents, Lorna and Paul. These two are a piece of work. Lorna cries over the smallest things, like when she can't find her sunglasses. And Paul, well, he thinks he's a financial genius just because he made $1,200 on Bitcoin back in 2016. They burst in without waiting for us to let them in, using their spare key like they were running from a fire. Lorna was in tears, her makeup smeared down her face, and Paul looked like he'd just been punched in the gut. I was frozen, and Nate just blinked, looking at them as if this was a regular Saturday morning occurrence. Lorna, sniffling and wiping her nose, immediately said, "If you really loved us, you'd give us your savings. We raised him. We deserve it." There was no warm-up, no explanation, just that. I laughed, thinking it was some kind of sick joke. They'd asked for money before, sure, small loans, emergency help, but it was always in small amounts and never paid back. I kept track of it, but I wasn't keeping score until now. But this time, they wanted everything, all of our savings. And Nate, my husband, my partner, sighed, no anger, just exhaustion, and said, "They have a point." I couldn't even speak. I just stared at him. I walked into the kitchen and grabbed a folder I prepared earlier in the week. When I came back into the living room, I sat down calmly and opened it. "Good news," I said. "You can't have the savings, because I already spent all." There was a moment of complete silence. They stared at me like I'd grown a second head. Paul took a step forward, his voice rising. "What the hell do you mean you spent our money?" I flipped the page over. "Not your money. Not even Nate's. That account was in my name. I moved it into a legal trust. Every dollar is locked away, and you can't touch it." Lorna's crying stopped immediately. Her whole face fell, and Paul looked like he might explode. Nate still didn't say anything. I had something else in the folder. It was a printed spreadsheet, 3 pages long, detailing every cent they had ever asked us for. Gas money, flights, birthday cash for Paul's sketchy startup, medical bills that never existed, emergency car repairs that somehow included new rims, and a detailed job. Everything. The total was over $54,000. I slid the spreadsheet across the coffee table toward them. "Actually, based on this, it's you who owe us, not the other way around." Lorna opened her mouth, but then shut it again, speechless. Paul looked like he was going to start yelling. But I was done. I turned to Nate and asked, "Are you okay with this? With them demanding money from your wife like it's nothing?" He mumbled something under his breath. "It's just, they're my parents." I stared at him, deadpan. That's all I needed to hear. I stood up, walked to the door, and told them to leave. They didn't argue. Lorna muttered something under her breath as she walked out, and Paul shook his head like I was the crazy one. Nate followed them out without a word, not even looking back. After they left, I didn't cry, or yell like some might expect. I just cleaned the kitchen, wiped down the counters, and put on some low jazz music. The folder with the receipts still sat on the coffee table. When Nate came back 3 hours later, he acted like nothing had happened. He took off his shoes, sat down on the couch, and said, "I told them we can't give them anything right now." I said, "Maybe later, we just need time." I just stared at him, completely frozen. "Maybe later?" I asked. "Yeah, I didn't want to upset them more. You were pretty cold back there." I walked straight into our bedroom and shut the door behind me. We didn't speak for 3 days. I went to work, came home, and ate dinner alone. He tried talking to me a few times, small talk, but I ignored him. On the 4th night, I walked into the living room with another folder. He looked at me, a little nervous. "What's that?" I didn't hesitate. "Your parents didn't just cross a line, Nate. They bulldozed it." I handed him the folder. "It's a temporary separation agreement. Not a divorce, just space. You'll be staying at an Airbnb for the week. I've already booked it. You'll have time to think." That night, after he left, I went into the kitchen to get a glass of water. His laptop was still on the kitchen table, open, not locked. I didn't plan to snoop, but something told me I should. I started scrolling through his email. It wasn't spam or junk. It was a separate account I didn't know about. There were dozens, maybe more, of emails between him and his parents. They weren't just asking for our savings. They were planning on it. "She doesn't need to know yet. Let me handle it." One of the emails said, "Once we have the money, I'll talk her down. If she finds out, just cry and say you were trying to help." I kept scrolling, my heart sinking deeper into my stomach. I could feel my heart pounding so hard, I thought I might pass out. The weight of it was heavy in my neck and my chest. Then I found the email, the one that shattered me. The subject line was clear. "If she won't give it, you might need to file early." It was Nate's message, and it hit me like a gut punch. He was already planning his escape, and not just in terms of leaving me. He was strategizing on how to take everything. I couldn't wrap my head around it. He was always stubborn, but now he was being manipulative, already pushing for an early filing. You can't make this up. I stared at the email, reading it again and again, feeling like I was going to lose my mind. File early. Remar later. That was it. I felt my stomach churn, and I grabbed the trash can, throwing up from the sheer shock and disgust. It wasn't just betrayal. It was something worse. It was calculated. I quickly screenshot the email, sent to myself, and backed it up. Twice. Then, in a frenzy, I changed the locks. No hesitation. He wouldn't have access to anything anymore. I texted Nate, "You need to come back tomorrow with a cop to get your things." When he showed up, it wasn't with a cop, just him, alone. A huge mistake. He knocked loudly, but I didn't answer. He called me, and I let it ring, watching him from the upstairs window. He banged on the door, yelling, "See, I'm your husband. We can work through this." He begged, but I didn't feel the same anymore. I texted back, "I read the emails." He froze, backing up slowly like he had just been caught in a lie too big to fix. Then, without another word, he got into his car and drove off. I stared out the window, the emptiness creeping in. That afternoon, his mother called. I hesitated, but answered. She wasted no time. "How dare you lock our son out?" "You're being emotional," she scolded. I didn't let her finish before I snapped back. "I saw the emails, Lorna." There was silence on the other end. "Then you brought this on yourself," I said before hanging up. A few days later, the letter arrived. Nate had filed for divorce. It was a classic play. He tried to make it look like I was the unstable one. He painted me as the one who couldn't handle finances and tried to take advantage of me emotionally. He even claimed the house was his because it was bought with his money, even though I had all the records, bank statements, the deed, the closing documents, everything that proved it was mine. But it didn't matter. He was good at playing the victim. Try and make me look like the villain. But I wasn't mad. I wasn't angry either. I was focused. 9 years together, and he was tearing it all down in less than a week. I wasn't about to let him do that without a fight. I went into action. I made files, digital, physical, color-coded receipts, emails, texts, and bank transfers. I hired a lawyer, a real one, someone sharp and ruthless. I couldn't afford to play it safe anymore. This wasn't just about a marriage falling apart. It was about protecting my future. When I told my lawyer everything, she barely blinked. "This is going to get ugly." "Are you ready?" she asked. "It's already ugly," I said. "Let's make it loud." One day, I was working from home when my phone rang. It was an unknown number, which I normally ignored, but something told me to pick it up. It was a woman on the other end of the line, her voice hesitant. "You don't know me, but I think I know your husband." She paused. "We went on a few dates. I didn't know he was married until now." My heart stopped. This was the last thing I wanted to hear, but I needed to know the truth. She explained they had gone out a few times. Dinners, drinks, but one of those dates had been on our anniversary weekend. I had sent him off, thinking he was visiting his uncle in Oklahoma. Turns out, he drove 2 hours to meet her in Waco. I was sick, but it didn't stop there. She told me she wasn't the only one. She'd seen him on Hinge. I didn't believe her, so I made a fake profile. Same face, edited photo, a slightly different name, and a bio that said I was divorced. I went on the app, looking for him, and there he was, actively searching for new women while I was still at home. Try to hold everything together. I compiled everything, every screenshot from the dating apps, all the email logs, messages with other women, even a Venmo payment where he reimbursed one of them for Plan B, with a pizza emoji. I didn't even have to say a word. I handed everything over to my lawyer. She took it coldly and calmly and presented it in court. The other lawyer? She looked like she was about to vomit. Nate's lawyer tried to defend him, claiming that none of this changed the fact that I was being cold and spiteful, but I leaned forward, steady as ever. "You're right," I said. "I am being cold, because you burned every bridge between us. Then you want me to warm your feet on the ashes." The judge quickly shut him down, and I could see the panic in Nate's eyes. A week later, I got a call from my accountant. Someone had tried to access my savings trust, not once, but 3 times in the past week. He froze it, but it didn't sit right with me. The trust had double-factor authentication, separate logins, firewalls. How could anyone get past that? Then he told me it came from a known IP address, from a computer in my own household. It was Nate trying to break into the trust. He had failed every time, but he tried, behind my back, while he was still playing the innocent victim in court. That was the final straw. I filed for a restraining order. It wasn't just betrayal anymore. It was theft. It was manipulation. It was dangerous. By the time I found out about the trust, the divorce proceedings were moving forward, inch by inch. He kept stalling, filing motions for delays, blaming me for everything. But the hack attempt changed everything. My lawyer filed for an emergency court order, bringing in digital forensics to track the IP address. It was traced directly to his home computer, the same one I had given him for our anniversary. The judge wasn't amused. Our final hearing came that October. The courtroom was cold, and the air outside was dry and sharp, much like the emptiness I felt inside. Nate showed up in an oversized, cheap suit, with his parents in tow, Lorna in black, like she was attending a funeral. Paul, his father, had his arms crossed, already looking like he hated the outcome. I sat alone, trying to keep my composure. My lawyer whispered, "This is where it all ends." Then the bomb dropped. My lawyer presented every piece of evidence, the Venmo payments, the emails, the dating app messages, even a failed attempt to access my trust. And then she played the voicemail, the one I hadn't heard until night before. It was Nate's voice, accidentally left on a voicemail, when he called a friend. "I don't care anymore," he said. "Let her think she won. I'll tell the judge she's mentally unstable. Maybe she'll cave. If not, I'll take what I can and go to Florida. I've already talked to someone there." Then he laughed. Honestly, I should have married someone dumber. There was a stunned silence in the courtroom. Lorna gasped. Paul looked like he had been slapped. The judge looked at Nate and said, "Mr. Walker, you may want to reconsider your strategy. You're not the one being wronged here." Nate couldn't speak. He didn't even try. Lorna stood up, shouting, "You told us she was manipulating you, that she was controlling, that she cut you off. The judge told her to sit down, but she didn't listen. You said you had to lie. You made us believe she was a problem." That was all I needed, the validation. Lorna went silent. Paul looked at his son, shaking his head, muttering, "We raised a coward." Nate didn't say another word. The judge ruled in my favor. I got full protection of my trust, no financial or spousal support, and no claim to the house. The house was mine. I walked out and Nate didn't look back. Lorna didn't say goodbye, and Paul was silent. I almost felt bad for him, but only for a second. I had expected to feel relief, but I didn't. I felt hollow, not angry, not sad, just empty, like the weight of everything had been lifted. But the scar remained. Months later, friends checked in on me. Some were shocked, others weren't. One said, "See, you were always too calm around him. Now I get it. You were holding it all together." Another said, "He never deserved your spine." I appreciated their words, but I didn't need them to know I was okay. I looked back, and I realized the betrayal wasn't just about money or cheating. It was about trust. It was about giving your life to someone, only to realize they saw you as nothing more than a tool. I wasn't his partner. I was his fallback plan, a financial safety net he could walk away from when things got too hard. 6 months later, I sold the house, not because I couldn't afford it, but because I wanted to leave behind the space that held his ghost. I bought a small cottage near Austin, fixed it up myself, and planted a garden. White hydrangeas and lavender. Something new, something fresh, something mine. I still kept a folder of receipts, not to hold a grudge, but as a reminder. No matter how calm, kind, or collected you are, you're allowed to stand up for yourself. You're allowed to protect your peace. And sometimes the best revenge isn't rage. It's rebuilding your life, so big, so bold, and so beautiful that the people who underestimated you are left watching from the sidelines, knowing they'll never be part of it again.